Rain tapped violently against the glass, a steady rhythm that matched the ache in Emily's chest. Her forehead leaned against the cold window pane as trees blurred past, skeletal and leafless, swallowed by the storm. Every drop seemed to echo. The silence between her and her mother, who hadn't said a word since they left the house. Emily's fingers fidgeted with the frayed cuff of her hoodie, her breath fogging the glass with every sigh. The shelter wasn't her idea. Nothing had been her idea since the move. Now she was just a passenger, in the car and in her own life. Water soaked through Emily's sneakers the moment she stepped out. She shivered, pulling her hoodie tighter around her shoulders. Her mum was already ahead, her umbrella doing little to shield them both. Emily lagged behind, dragging her feet through puddles that splashed cold up her legs. The shelter loomed like a forgotten building, its chipped sign swinging in the wind. A gust hit her face, but she kept walking. There was no choice. No one asked how she felt anymore, not since Dad left, not since the move, and especially not today. The door slammed shut behind them, muffling the storm but unleashing another kind of chaos. Barks echoed off concrete walls, high-pitched yelps and deep, booming howls merging into a dissonant chorus. The air smelled of wet fur and disinfectant. Emily winced as a dog threw itself at the bars of its cage. But in the far left corner, where the light barely reached, a large German shepherd sat unmoving. No bark, no growl, just silence. Eyes low, body still, like it had seen too much or stopped caring. Emily's eyes locked on the shadowed figure. The noise faded, if only. For a second, Emily stood frozen. The dog lifted its head slowly, cautiously, as if expecting disappointment. Its eyes weren't aggressive, but tired old in a way that had nothing to do with age. Emily's breath caught. In those brief seconds, she saw herself, not mirrored exactly, but reflected in pain and fear and the desperate need not to be hurt again. Her arms fell to her sides. For once, she wasn't alone in the feeling. Laughter rose from the front desk, too loud, too detached. Emily's mother chatted about breeds, sizes, and shedding. Her voice was bright, polite, rehearsed. Behind her, Emily inched closer to the German shepherd's cage. The dog didn't move. Neither did she. Just watching each other, two souls stuck in the same silent language. Emily reached for the bars without knowing why, her fingers trembling. The dog flinched, then held still waiting. Only weeks ago, her life had been full of color-old friends, familiar streets, a house that smelled like Sunday pancakes. Now, her room was a stranger. Pale walls, no posters, just echoes. She didn't unpack her books, didn't open her journal. What was the point? Every hallway at school felt like a battlefield of eyes she didn't know. Her mother tried. She guessed, but it wasn't enough. Emily had mastered the art of quiet, of being invisible. Like the dog before her, her mother was calling her now. Something about a golden retriever mixed with a great temperament. Emily didn't respond. Her hand hovered just inches from the cage. The German shepherd didn't move, but its eyes never left hers. In that look was a kind of fragile hope. Not loud, not desperate, just a whisper, "Don't go." Emily's throat tightened. She didn't believe in signs or fate anymore, but something in her refused to walk away. Not yet, not from this. The room was silent except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights above. Shadow, a massive black German shepherd, stood in the far corner of the shelter, his eyes wide with distrust. No one had been able to get close to him since he'd arrived. His growls were low, his body tense. He didn't want to be touched, not by anyone. His past was a mystery, but it was clear he had known nothing but pain. Emily stood in the doorway, hands trembling as she gripped the cold metal frame. Her mum, beside her, whispered something about the dog's history, a rough life on the streets. Neglected, maybe even abused. Emily listened absently, her gaze locked on the dog. There was something about Shadow, something in his sadness that mirrored her own. Then, as if sensing her presence, Shadow's eyes turned to meet hers. For a moment, the air between them hung heavy. She didn't move, didn't dare speak, just stood frozen in place. His gaze lingered on her, and something shifted in him. The shelter worker spoke, breaking the moment. He's been here for months. We've tried everything, treats, coaxing, patience. He won't trust anyone. But as Emily took a slow step forward, something changed. Shadow's body relaxed, just slightly, as if he too was finally willing to take a chance. The energy between them was undeniable. Emily's heart beat faster. She wasn't sure why, maybe it was just instinct, but she knew she had to keep going. As Emily moved closer, she watched Shadow lower his head, his gaze never leaving hers. There was no growl, no snarl, just the quiet intensity of his dark, sorrowful eyes. In those eyes, Emily saw a reflection of herself, someone who had been hurt, abandoned, and afraid to trust. She stopped just a few feet away, her hand gently outstretched, but not forcing contact. She didn't need words. The pain in those eyes spoke volumes. At that moment, Emily felt an unspoken connection between them. It wasn't a bond born of words or promises, but one of raw, silent understanding. Emily kneeled slowly, the silence thick around them. She didn't know why she did it, but she lowered herself to his level. "I know what it feels like," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "The loneliness, the fear, but you're not alone anymore." Shadow's eyes never left hers, and though he didn't move, Emily could feel the tension in his body start to dissipate. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was something. A shared vulnerability. "Hey," Emily continued softly, "I'm here. You don't have to be afraid." The words were a fragile bridge, one that stretched toward a dog who had never known the comfort of human warmth. She didn't know if Shadow understood, but she felt it. His gaze softened ever so slightly. There was a moment of stillness before Shadow's body tensed again, as if unsure of what to do. But then something unexpected happened. He shifted, ever so cautiously, and took a single, deliberate step toward her. It was barely a small, hesitant movement, but for Emily, it felt like the world had shifted. Her breath caught in her throat. For the first time, Shadow had taken a step toward her, toward trust. The room seemed to hold its breath. The shelter staff exchanged glances, surprised, unsure of what they were witnessing. Emily's heart swelled with hope, but she remained still, not wanting to rush him. When Emily stood up, her mum's voice cracked through the silence. "Are you sure about this, honey?" Her mother's concern was palpable. "Shadow, ... he's been through so much. I'm not sure he's ready for home." Emily's mum was right to be concerned. They had tried fostering dogs before, and each time there had been setbacks, behavioral issues, emotional scars. But Emily had been through her own darkness lately, and this felt different, I'm sure. Emily replied, her voice steady, her heart resolute. "He needs a chance, and I need him too. We can help each other." Her mom hesitated, seeing something in her daughter's eyes, a determination. "Yes, but also a flicker of hope that hadn't been there in months. Emily was right. Maybe Shadow was exactly what she needed, just as much as she might be the one thing he needed to. As they drove home, Emily felt the quiet stir of something she hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of warmth in her chest. She glanced in the rearview mirror at Shadow, who lay quietly in the back seat. He was still a mystery to her, but his presence was calming. Her mum looked over at her, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at her lips. "I think you might be right about him." Emily nodded, not taking her eyes off the road. "He's not just a dog, Mum. He's a reason to feel again, a reason to hope." It was an unspoken truth between them. Shadow wasn't just any dog, he was a chance for healing, for moving forward. The shelter staff had voiced their concerns when Emily had insisted on taking Shadow home. They knew his past, his trauma, and they feared it might be too much for anyone, especially someone as fragile as Emily. But Emily didn't listen. She had a quiet resolve, a certainty that this was meant to be. And so, against the odds, Shadow walked out of that shelter with her, his head held low. But there was something in his step, a quiet determination that matched Emily's own. Together, they faced the uncertain path ahead, unsure of what the future held, but certain of one thing: they would face it together. Shadow's eyes never left Emily as she placed the bowl of food in front of him, the smell of kibble mixing with the faint scent of rain that had settled on the windowsill. But when she crouched down to his level, his gaze shifted never quite. Meeting hers, he turned his face, the flicker of distrust still so visible, and slowly he pulled back. He had no appetite, no desire to connect. His body language was shut off. Yet Emily noticed something. Despite his refusal to eat, despite his distance, he never left her side, not once. It was as if an invisible thread had connected them. Emily, a girl broken by her own silent battles, couldn't help but notice the fragility of that bond, the fragile start of something neither of them fully understood yet. As the days blend into each other, Emily's evening ritual becomes a silent plea. She'd sit beside Shadow, the two of them alone in the quiet of her room. Every evening she would read aloud, the words spilling softly from her lips like a lullaby, directed at no one, but meant for both of them. Shadow didn't respond. He never moved, his ears never perked up, his eyes never softened. But Emily noticed he was always there, sitting still by her side, as though her voice had become a familiar warmth. Her soft whispers, the cadence of her voice, had become his safe place. She would read from her books, never pushing him, letting the silence surround them both. But in that stillness, something passed between them, a silent understanding that was beginning to bloom. One night, Emily's sleep was torn by a nightmare so vivid, so cruel, that she woke up gasping, her body drenched in cold sweat. She could feel the weight of grief pressing against her chest again, that familiar ache she had buried for so long. But as she opened her door, wiping her eyes, she froze. There, lying on the floor just outside her room, was Shadow, his body stretched out, his eyes closed but alert, as if guarding her from the shadows of her mind. The chill of the night air swirled around them, but Shadow stayed still, unwavering. His presence was a quiet defiance of the darkness that had once consumed her. He had heard her cries, heard the pain that slipped past her defenses, and for the first time, he was the one who was there, silent, watchful, and protective. It was in this moment, this quiet act of loyalty, that their bond began to solidify, bridging the gap between their two silent worlds. Emily found herself talking to Shadow more often now, the words tumbling out before she even realized they were there. At first it was just fragments thoughts about her day, or the confusing swirl of emotions that she couldn't quite make sense of. She didn't expect a response. She didn't need one. As the days passed, Emily's conversations grew longer. It started with the simple things. "I miss her, Shadow," she'd say, referring to the mother she had lost years ago. Shadow would just sit, staring at her with those deep brown eyes, not judging, not interrupting. There were nights when she poured out her thoughts, unraveling the grief that had once made her silent. And then, one night, as Emily talked about her sorrow and the way her heart ached for something she could never get back, Shadow gently nudged his head against her lap. It wasn't a solution, not a cure, but in that moment it felt like he understood more than anyone had ever understood. Before, his stillness was a language all its own, and Emily began to open up not just to him, but to herself. It was late one evening, after Emily had spent another hour reading to Shadow, when her mother quietly entered the room. She watched the girl and the dog for a long moment, and then, with a soft voice, she said, "He's helping you heal." Emily looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. Her mother smiled gently, the years of pain she had seen reflected in Emily's eyes, now mirroring her own. "You were so lost, sweetheart," her mom whispered, reaching out to brush Emily's hair back from her face. "But look at you now. You're talking, you're opening up. Shadow has a way of breaking through the walls we build, doesn't he?" Emily didn't have the words to respond, but the look on her face spoke volumes. In a way that no therapist could, Shadow had become her silent companion in the healing process. The truth about Shadow's past had come to Emily in pieces. It started with a quiet conversation her mother had with the shelter one afternoon. He was abandoned, her mum had said, her voice strained with emotion. When his owners moved, they left him behind, locked out in the backyard for days. The words hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. Her heart broke for the dog who had once been so alone. As she listened, the pieces of Shadow's past came together: his reluctance to trust, his silent demeanor, the way he kept his distance. From people, it wasn't just fear, it was painful. Shadow had known abandonment in a way that no animal should. The realization settled heavily in Emily's chest. Their bond deepened, not out of pity, but through shared sorrow. She could relate. She had known what it was like to feel like a lost soul, clinging to whatever was left, waiting for someone to see her, to understand her. And now, Shadow had found her just as she had found him. Every time Emily thought of the loneliness Shadow had endured, the quiet pain in her chest grew. She would hug him tighter, pressing him close as though he might disappear at any moment. She could feel the pulse of his heart under her fingertips, steady and warm, the rhythm of his existence steadying hers. She needed him more than she cared to admit, and she could sense that his need for her was just as strong. She could feel his unspoken gratitude, the bond they had built, solidifying with each passing day. It wasn't just about saving him anymore. It was about saving each other. And every time she hugged him, she clung to that feeling, knowing that, for now, they were both safe. Everything was going perfectly, till the call came. Emily's heart dropped when she saw the shelter's name on her phone screen. The voice on the other end was apologetic, but firm. "There's someone here who says they're Shadow's original owner," the worker said. Emily's stomach twisted. A man had come forward, claiming that Shadow had been his dog years ago. He had apparently been looking for Shadow ever since his family had moved away. The words spun in Emily's mind like a whirlwind, each one more impossible than the last. She looked down at Shadow, who lay curled at her feet. He had become so, much more than just a dog to her. He was her anchor, her healer, the one thing she had left that truly understood her. But now, just as their bond had started to blossom, the fear of losing him pressed heavily on her chest. What if the man was telling the truth? What if Shadow had to go back to a life that no longer held any meaning for him? The shelter had begun their investigation, and Emily's world tilted precariously. Would she lose him now? The anxiety was unbearable. Every time Emily thought about the shelter's investigation, a wave of fear would wash over her. The thought of Shadow being taken away from her, after everything they had been through, felt like a cruel joke. She had fought so hard to keep him in her life, and now the fear of losing him made her heart ache in ways she couldn't explain. She clung to him in silence, unsure of what the future would bring. Would he have to go back to the man who abandoned him, or could their bond withstand the test of time? Emily didn't know, but one thing was certain: she wouldn't let go without a fight. The door creaked open, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had known this moment was coming, but the reality of it hit her like a slap to the face. The man entered, tall and cold, his eyes locked on Shadow, who immediately tensed beside her. A low, gut-wrenching growl rumbled from deep within the dog's chest. Its sound unfamiliar, yet so raw and unmistakably terrifying. The growl sent a shiver down Emily's spine, and she could feel Shadow's body vibrating with tension. The once gentle dog was now a shield of fury, her eyes locked on the man with a primal intensity that made the air feel thick. Emily could see the fight rising in the dog, the protective instincts taking over as memories of pain and neglect flared. In her eyes, her stomach twisted into knots as she watched Shadow, but she didn't dare move. Every ounce of her being was focused on what would happen next. The man seemed unfazed, but for Emily, this was more than a confrontation. It was the terrifying confirmation of the torment Shadow had endured before they met. The man's voice sliced through the tension. "You've ruined her," he spat, eyes narrowing in contempt. "She used to be tougher, real guard dog. Now she's just a mutt with a soft heart." His words felt like venom, aimed directly at Emily's heart. Shadow, once a weapon in the man's cruel hands, had now become a symbol of love and loyalty in Emily's life. And hearing him belittle her like that twisted something deep inside Emily. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the leash, but Shadow growled louder, as though pleading with Emily to stop him. Emily's pulse raced, and every instinct screamed. For her to protect this dog, she'd come to know the real Shadow, the kind, loving animal who had given her everything, and she wouldn't let anyone take that away. Emily's mind flashed with images quick, violent, and searing. A basement dark, damp, and silent except for the faint rattle of chains. Shadow, trapped in the shadows, barely able to move, trembling in fear, her fur matted with dirt. The cold, the hunger, the silence that spoke volumes. Emily's stomach churned. The scars she had seen on Shadow's body, the way the dog flinched at sudden movements, now made perfect sense. Shadow had been tortured, neglected, treated as nothing more than a tool for cruelty. The realization hit like a tidal wave. Every nervous tremor, every frightened glance, every harsh bark was not just the dog's nature, which is a survival instinct born from an agonizing past. And now Emily understood. Shadow had been broken, but she had rebuilt her piece by piece. Not today. Emily's voice broke through the tension. It was a whisper at first, then louder, stronger. She stood, stepping directly between Shadow and the man Her heart pounded in her chest, but her feet were planted firm. "You're not taking her anywhere. You've done enough damage already." The man's eyes widened in shock. "Get out of my way, girl. You don't know what you're messing with." His voice was icy, but it only fueled Emily's fire. She wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. The man's hand twitched toward Shadow's collar, but before he could grab it, Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but fierce. "She's not a tool for you to use. She's a living being, my family now." The words tumbled from her lips, and with each one, the truth became clearer. This was no longer about the dog, it was about the bond they had forged, the life they had built together. And she would not let him destroy that. Emily single quotes us mother, who had stood quietly by, watching this all unfold, moved toward her daughter. She placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, her grip steady and firm. Her silence, once filled with doubt, was now replaced by strength. She stood beside Emily, a silent pillar of support. "I'm with her," Emily's mother said, her voice calm but resolute. The man's eyes flickered from mother to daughter, his expression darkening as the weight of their unity settled over him. No longer was Emily alone in this battle. Now she had her mother's strength beside her hand. That made all the difference. The shelter director, a quiet but compassionate man, stepped forward from the shadows. He had been watching the confrontation with growing concern. Now, his voice cut through the tension with authority. "She's not going anywhere," he said firmly. "We've documented everything, her medical records, her progress here, the emotional bond she's formed with Emily. You've lost all rights to her." The man faltered, his face flushing with anger. "You can't do this," he shouted, but the shelter director was unmoved. "We can, and we will," he replied, his calm demeanor unwavering. He turned to Emily, nodding in approval. "We're filing a report right now. You and Shadow are safe." Emily felt a wave of relief crash over her as the man was escorted from the shelter. Shadow, her loyal protector, would never have to endure that cruelty again. With the man gone, the tension in the room lifted, but Emily's body was still trembling. She could barely process the events that had just unfolded. As she walked slowly back to the room she shared with Shadow, her heart felt heavy, torn between relief and exhaustion. She collapsed onto the bed, feeling a weight she hadn't realized. She'd been carrying lift, but in its place was a quiet ache. She wanted to scream, to cry, but her body refused to let the tears fall. She was overwhelmed, unsure if she'd ever feel safe again. Shadow, sensing her distress, walked over to the bed, her movements slow and cautious. Emily opened her eyes and met the dog's gaze. Shadow's eyes were soft, understanding that as Emily lay in the darkness, feeling utterly drained, a soft, warm nudge pressed against her hand. It was Shadow who had slowly walked over to her bedside and was now lying quietly at her feet. The dog's gentle nudge was a silent promise that no matter what had happened, they were in this together. Emily reached down, her fingers trembling as she ran them through Shadow's fur. For the first time since the confrontation, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, letting the calmness of the dog's presence wash over her. Shadow had been through so much, yet she still found the strength to offer comfort. Emily closed her eyes, her mind finally at peace. They had won this battle, but the real victory was the unbreakable bond they now shared. Together they could face anything. The house, once heavy with quiet sorrow, was beginning to hum with the sound of joy. Emily's mother, who had spent so many evenings lost in her thoughts, now caught herself smiling as she listened to Emily's laughter echoing down the hallway. The air seemed to lighten with every playful bark from Shadow. No longer did they hide behind closed doors, nursing wounds too painful to speak of. There was a subtle but undeniable shift. The weight of loss and uncertainty had loosened its grip, replaced by the unmistakable warmth of healing. Emily's mum watched from the doorway as Shadow bounded into the room, his tail wagging furiously, his eyes shining with an unspoken love. He wasn't just a dog, now he was family, a friend, a beacon of hope. Emily sat down at her desk, the sketchpad resting in front of her like a long-lost treasure. It had been weeks since she'd picked it up, too many days buried under layers of grief and confusion. But now, with Shadow curled beside her, his presence a comforting warmth, the familiar itch to create returned. Her pencil, guided by hands that had once been hesitant, moved across the page effortlessly. As the first stroke hit the paper, a rush of color filled her mind, a vibrant burst of life that had been absent for so long. Shadow's gentle snore in the background was the perfect soundtrack. Slowly, her world was coming alive again, not just in her art, but in her heart. Shadow, once a trembling figure that hid from every sound and movement, had transformed. His once cautious steps had given way to bounding enthusiasm. Every morning, without fail, he would stand by the front door, tail wagging in anticipation, waiting for Emily to return from school. As soon as the school bus appeared down the street, Shadow's excitement would reach a fever pitch. He was no longer the fearful dog who flinched at the slightest touch. He had come to trust the rhythm of his new life, where each day was filled with joy, security, and the warm presence of his best friend. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. Each day, Emily and Shadow grew closer, their bond becoming something unbreakable. Evening routines had become their special time. Emily would sit cross-legged on the floor, Shadow lying beside her as she read him bedtime stories. His soft snoring was the punctuation to her tales of adventure, laughter filling the air whenever she giggled at his eager attempts to snatch the treats from her hands. Every belly rub, every whispered word, and every shared moment added another layer of connection between them. There was no need for words only, a deep, understanding silence that spoke volumes. Together, they had found a peace that neither could have imagined alone. On the anniversary of Shadow's adoption, Emily decided to do something extra special. She secretly planned a small celebration, a party just for him. She decorated the living room with streamers and balloons, preparing a small cake with a dog-friendly frosting. When Shadow entered, he was met with a chorus of cheers from Emily and her family. She placed a party hat on his head, and for the first time, the dog didn't flinch. Instead, he stood proudly, tail wagging with excitement. Emily's heart swelled as she saw the joy in his eyes. For a dog that had once known only fear and uncertainty, this was his moment to feel loved, cherished, and celebrated. Emily spent weeks compiling photos, mementos, and memories from the day she and Shadow first met. She filled the scrapbook with images of his first hesitant steps into her home, the smiles they shared, the laughter, the healing. Every scar, every milestone, every tender moment was captured in those pages, a testament to the journey they'd both taken to find each other. She carefully inscribed the title on the front, "The Day We Both Came Home." As Emily flipped through the pages, she realized that this was more than just a scrapbook. It was the story of how they had both been lost and found. The sun had begun to set, casting a soft golden light through the window as Emily sat on the couch, lost in the comfort of the moment. Shadow, who had once trembled with fear, now rested his head gently in her lap. His breathing was slow, steady, and content. It was a simple, quiet moment, but it was everything. Emily ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the bond they had built over time. He had saved her, and she had saved him. Together, they had created a home, a place where love wasn't just something you felt, it was something you gave. With Shadow's gentle presence, Emily knew that they had found something deeper than comfort. They had found peace. Emily had been through so much. Shadow too. Both were broken in ways that only time and love could heal. It wasn't about fixing each other, it was about finding strength in each other's presence. Understanding that the most powerful kind of healing happens when two souls decide to walk the same path. The day Emily took Shadow in, neither of them realized how much they needed each other. Emily had been lost in her own grief, her world darkened by the loss of someone she loved deeply. Shadow had been abandoned, scarred by a painful past of neglect and fear, but together they were learning to heal. Their journey wasn't fast, but it was genuine. As Emily gave Shadow food, shelter, and a safe place to stay, Shadow gave her something more, a light, a reason to smile again, and, most importantly, a way to move forward. Emily opened her home to a wounded soul, but Shadow, with his deep eyes and quiet presence, offered her something she hadn't expected, the kind of light that only unconditional love can bring. Emily's heart had been a closed door for so long. She'd stopped believing in the warmth of a genuine connection. Shadow, with his gentle spirit, didn't ask for anything in return. His wagging tail and comforting presence slowly pulled her from her isolation. He never spoke a word, but with every nudge of his head against her hand, he was giving her the gift of hope. Emily realized that the light he brought wasn't in the form of answers or solutions. It was the warmth of simply being there, a companion that never judged and always stayed. Their bond became a powerful reminder that no matter how deep the pain, we're never truly alone. Emily often felt as though her sorrow was something only she could carry, something too heavy for anyone to bear, but Shadow never judged her for her sadness. He simply sat by her side, his presence a quiet balm to her weary heart. And as Emily healed, she began to understand that their journey together wasn't just about her healing. Shadow was healing too. It was a reciprocal bond, built on the silent understanding that both had suffered, and both had a future worth fighting for. Shadow had suffered in silence before Emily found him, and now they were each other's reason to keep going. Their story proved that love has a way of guiding you even through the darkest moments. There were days when Emily felt she was drowning in despair, but then there was Shadow standing by her side, his head resting on her lap, his soft breathing a steady reminder that love, in its purest form, doesn't need words. When she was consumed by darkness, Shadow's love showed her that even the smallest act of affection, like a wagging tail or a nudge for attention, could brighten the darkest day. Their love was quiet but constant, and that was enough to light her way. Healing doesn't always come with grand gestures. It often begins with the quiet strength of compassion. The greatest gift Emily gave Shadow was compassion. She didn't have to do anything grand. She simply showed up, day after day. And in return, Shadow gave her something profound, the ability to trust again. Compassion didn't demand anything of either of them, but it was a powerful force that began to stitch their wounds back together. For Emily, it was the realization that simple acts of kindness, like feeding a hungry dog or offering a gentle touch had the power to heal. That their journey was a testament to the incredible power of second chances, not just for survival, but for the chance to truly live. When Emily first found Shadow, he was broken, emotionally scarred, and physically frail. But she saw beyond his wounds, beyond his fear. She saw the potential for a new life, for both of them. In taking a chance on him, Emily gave Shadow a second chance at life. And in return, Shadow gave Emily a second chance at happiness, at joy, and at the realization that love always finds a way to bring you back from the brink. Their story wasn't just about overcoming hardships. It was about embracing the beauty of second chances, both in life and in love.